Greetings everyone, my name is Buck Business, and today I'll be reviewing Into the Badlands Season 2, Episode 4, Palm of the Iron Fox. Now, we begin this episode seeing that Quinn is getting ready to leave and wants to make sure that Vale isn't left alone. Now, what's so interesting here is that a good chunk of this episode follows Vale, and there's a pretty solid tension parallel for this, everything revolving around her and the inevitable breakout battle of the Conclave meeting. And speaking of that, the widow is prepping up, and Waldo tells her to be fearless. Now, unfortunately, I didn't catch her name, but for simplicity's sake, I'll just call her the Baron in the white dress. So, her and the widow pretty much introduce each other, and they try to get at each other just a little bit when they are talking, but it's a pretty short scene. Anyways, we cut back to the butterfly group where Tilda is encountered by, I believe her name was Tissa. Now, Tissa is wondering why Tilda didn't go to the widow's aid, and she pretty much explains the situation and kind of feels like she needs to go later on, but we'll get to that. Meanwhile, MK is still sneaking around that little area that he was in, and he takes his master's origami piece, one of them anyways, and he sniffs out this white smoking fume, which leads him to that illusion place where he sees his mother being killed, and once again faces his darker self and loses again and ends up in the mirror room somehow. Anyways, we cut back to Vale, who's convinced Edgar to let her into the sunroom, where apparently she left some sort of hook. I don't know when that happened, but anyways, she ends up trying to start climbing when he leaves. So we headed back over to the Conclave meeting where we see Gabriel, one of Quinn's clippers, got inside as a chef. He goes outside and sends a messenger bird to Quinn, and then Quinn talks to one of his clippers about how sons disappoint their fathers and vice versa, which this little thing will come back later on. And then Edgar checks in on Vale, who manages to come back down just in time. And they head back out, and Edgar starts preparing some sort of meal, and Vale takes some sort of vial and pours it into the water, which he gives to Edgar. He talks about how he admires Sonny, and you could just see that cold expression from Vale as he just sort of drinks the water and then passes out. She runs to the door, which he locked beforehand, and she had put baby Henry down to attempt to smash the lock with this crowbar she found. But Edgar does eventually wake up and tackles her to the ground. They have a struggling moment, and she's trying to get away. She hits him with a rock, I believe it was, and then she attempts to get out again, but gets tackled again, and then this time she gets the crowbar and finishes him off. So now the Conclave meeting is officially starting, and the widow is the topic of discussion, and how her oil refinery belongs to her, and how she is willing to defend it, pretty much. Now she's apparently willing to part with taking in potential rebels, as an earlier agreement with the Baron in White. She was willing to part ways with that. But it is Ryder who suggests banishing her based on her actions, and all of the barons who are there sitting on the opposite end of her vote against her. And once they say she lost all of her privileges as a baron, she says that she's willing to fight them off. And we see that Gabriel is now letting in Quinn's group, and they make their way inside. Of course, Ryder is shocked by this, and he's the first to attempt to get out of Dodge. And an all out fight begins between all the different barons and all the clippers from all the various groups. Now we get to see the Widow in action against the Baron of White in White for a bit, but she escapes as well. Now Tilda, as I mentioned earlier, she had been worried, so she came in to save Waldo and then joined the two of them, that being also the Widow. Now, Quinn is cut off by Jade, who Quinn is attempting to get to Ryder. And Jade is attempting to reason with him, but he's just walking straight on through. Ryder ends up in this hedge maze, and he ends up making his way to a dead end. Quinn just walks, essentially strolls his way over to Ryder, and he wants Ryder to kill him, but Ryder doesn't. Quinn loses his temper and kills Ryder instead. Now, this could just end up being like what happened to Quinn, so maybe, I don't know, maybe Ryder might come back somehow, but for the time being, I'll just say he's dead. Anyways, this episode was an explosion of action just waiting to burst. And Vale's shining moments felt more desperate and frantic, and it left, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this sort of tension. It's going to be interesting to see her explain her situation, because she seems to manage to know how to get out of these scenarios by explaining herself away. So there's that. And the story of the widow, now that she is apparently not a baron, I think is going to be more interesting now, more than ever. Anyways, that is my recap review for this episode, and if you enjoyed it, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, farewell, everyone.